that number will just keep ticking up. So thank you everyone who has joined in the audience. Thank you to the speakers right now. We'll do some quick intros in a bit, but very excited to have this conversation with you all. Because this is a very prevalent and important topic to keep talking about continually, right? So that's sometimes when you make events, you want to have a different topic or a conversation, but with EVs and fleets, I think it's important to keep having this conversation because so much is changing on a day-to-day basis that anyone in the space, whether new or existing, can learn something. And that's what we think you'll get from this session, whether you're just starting out electrifying your fleet or you're already been in that process. I think everyone listening in the audience will gain something from this star-studded panel of speakers and their expertise in fleet electrification. Before we dive into the introductions and then kick off the session, I wanted to give some administrative points, just as you all been hearing already if you're listening to the other Virtual Electrify sessions. This is being recorded, as you'll see on the video, and we will be made available 24 hours after in the hop-in replay section. We will also be sending out the recordings 2 weeks after for the event attendees, so be sure to look out for that. And then you'll see on the right-hand side there's a chat box and a Q&A box. Please do engage there. If you have any questions, drop them in the Q&A box, and I will try to address them for the other panelists as we get closer to the end of the session. And then there's a survey for when we're done. Please do take it because your insights are always helpful as we can improve how we conduct these. With that, I will quickly introduce myself and the other speakers, and then we will dive into the structure of this session. So my name is Vartan Badalian. I'm the transportation analyst here at GreenBiz. We are also joined by Jennifer Wright, who's the Director of Global EHS and Sustainability at Biogen, Simon Lonsdale, who is the Head of Sales and Strategy at Amply Power, and Maria Neve, who is the VP Electrification and Sustainability at Wheels Donlen. So thank you all for being here, for being a part of the conversation. Today's convo is going to break down to 4 main sections, with the first one being rightfully so labeled Electrifying Fleets 101. So I'm going to turn to you, Maria, and then to you, Jennifer. Both your companies are uniquely focused on electrifying fleets, so you can both tell a unique story in terms of what that process has been like. I would love to hear, I think the audience would love to hear, how many vehicles you're electrifying, what type of vehicles, and when your companies began this journey to electrify your fleets. So Maria and Jennifer. Oh, Maria, we can't necessarily hear you.
Sorry, I had the mute button on so I wouldn't make extra noise, and I forgot to take it off. You'd think I'd learn after 1.5 years. But at this point in time, Wheels Donlen is a fleet management company, so we actually have 2 fleets that we're concerned about. Our own internal corporate fleet, as well as our clients' fleets. Wheels Donlen has about 525,000 units under lease and management. So it is a fairly large number. Not all of those vehicles can be electrified at this particular point in time due to their use case scenarios and the availability of EVs. But we've got about 70 units in our internal corporate fleet, and we're working to electrify those as we speak. As vehicles become available, as charging infrastructure meets the needs, it's not just the vehicles, but it's also locations. We have to make sure that the vehicles can be used for our internal folks the way that we'd use a regular internal combustion engine unit. So from a client perspective, the clients are really leading the discussion based upon their own sustainability goals. We are here to collaborate with them, give them options, give them solutions. But the sustainability goals put in place by their individual corporations dictate how fast that moves. We have a client that has their corporate parent in Europe has said that they will be 100% electric by 2027, which is a very optimistic goal. And it is a bit of a challenge here in the U.S. to help that client get to that standpoint by 2027. The really important thing is, it is really important to ensure that you define your goals, your timeline, and create a baseline, and then do an EV assessment. Look at the vehicles that you currently have in the fleet. What vehicles can be replaced by an EV? Look at then the model availability. And then do a replacement forecast. Once we look at a replacement forecast, we can see how quickly you can turn over your fleet, depending upon when those vehicles are actually released. And then, of course, infrastructure assessments. 80% of vehicles are charged at home, which is a little bit different than what we're used to with an internal combustion vehicle. And then, of course, corporate fleets are always interested in the bottom line. So total cost of ownership models, as well as carbon reduction models, need to be modeled out. And then, of course, at the end of the day, you measure the progress. So it's an ongoing process, both internally and externally. And this is something that we have been doing for our internal fleet for the last few years. And as the vehicles have become available, we've seen a number of fleets move towards electric vehicles, especially those that have a lot of sedans and light-duty SUVs. Those that have work trucks and vans and things like that, it's a little bit more difficult for them to transition at this point in time. But it doesn't mean that they're not thinking about it.
Great. Yeah, so I can add on and talk a little bit about what Biogen's doing. So for those of you that don't know, Biogen is a biopharmaceutical company focused on neurological disorders. So we have a fleet of about 2,000 commercial sales folks around the world. So that's in the US, Canada, every market really, Asia Pac as well as LATAM. And back in March of 2020, we released a new climate and health initiative or announced a new initiative, which is a fossil fuel free commitment by 2040. So that means that we're looking to eliminate the use of fossil fuels across our own operations by 2040. And so, of course, this included our fleet. And so we joined the EV100 and made a commitment to an all-electric fleet also by 2027 timeframe. Which is a challenge, as Maria said, but we know that it needs to get done. And so we made the commitment and we're working tirelessly to see that it comes true. So as I mentioned, we have about 2,000 vehicles. These are sales reps who do a lot of driving. So these are not folks that are just driving into work. They have large sales territories and they need to do a lot of driving to healthcare centers, doctors' offices, and so on. And so you can imagine it's a challenge from market to market, right? Looking at the availability of vehicles as well as charging. I think for us, because some of the more rural drivers in the United States and other countries that are less developed with charging, that is our number one challenge really is access to the reliable charging, because some of them have pretty large territories and they're driving hundreds of miles or kilometers a day to reach some of their appointments. And then sometimes they can't charge when they get there because the facility doesn't have charging. And even if they do charge along the way, it's not easy and convenient. They have to go out of their way sometimes to find a charger and then sit for an hour. So I'm sure this is nothing new, right? People have been facing this for a while. We talked about, when's the turning point going to be around charging where people are very comfortable with the thought of purchasing an EV or leasing an EV. And we're not quite there yet in a lot of the places where Biogen is operating. And so that's a big challenge for us. But we're doing our assessments. So we do these employee assessments to look at what is their home charging situation like, what does their territory look like, and we've identified those folks that are good candidates in our what we called our pilot year, which was 2021, and we ended up converting about putting in about 150 orders for electric vehicles in the first year. Unfortunately, because of COVID and supply chain, we haven't actually received all those cars yet, but they are on order and we are patiently waiting for them. And we've got a subsequent plan each year for, where we think we can transition vehicles successfully. And we're also in the middle of, doing a more deep dive on our readiness in some of the more emerging markets like LATAM and Asia Pac, where we know that it's even further behind. And so, we're cautiously optimistic, but we're also realistic that, 2027 is going to be a huge lift. But as the charging infrastructure changes, as more vehicles become available, we're hoping to see sort of an exponential acceleration of things each year so that we can get closer and closer to our goal. So, yeah, I think that's a good intro, Vartan.
Yeah, I definitely agree. So you both actually laid out some of the challenges that I was going to ask you about. in terms of electrifying a fleet. And I think they're very common and what everyone's already experienced. So charging, access to reliable charging is one, which we'll touch on in a little bit. Having the right vehicles, the right driver, the right driver fit for a vehicle, so forth. So I'm going to go then to Simon, because Simon, you shared some interesting thoughts when we spoke earlier from your perspective, given that you focus Rampant Power on charging. You shared some insights around how you see the EV journey for a corporate fleet unfolding. So you shared that there's three buckets. One of it is just the planning phase, the next is the deployment phase, and then the operating phase. Can you build on that some more, or share some insights on what you mean from that?
Sure, thanks, Vartan. I think you put it very well. So at Amply Power, we exist really to simplify fleet electrification, fleet charging. We look at it really at the charging side, and then would kind of liaise with Donlen, with Biogen, other companies like that as they deploy those fleets into place. So as you said, a lot of companies, as they start down this electrification journey, they think about the vehicles and the access to that and the impact of their drivers on that. But they also need, in the electric world, to think about the infrastructure because it's very different. As it was said earlier, it's not all charging at a gas station. Now it's a mix. It could be some charging at home. We started focusing on charging it in depots. And so charging fleets of electric buses, trucks, vans that go to a depot, we were able to establish for our customers 99.9% uptime. Their vehicles are charged and ready to go on time, every time, for the lowest cost. And that's really important as fleets start out, especially in their pilot, that they're seen as successful. Having the vehicle charged and ready to go every time allows you to start worrying about the rest of that electrification workflow that's different from a diesel or a gas vehicle. With that foundation, we moved into these spaces which are a little more challenging, corporate fleets, where people are trying to put charging in at home. They're trying to work out when they go to customers, when they go to their headquarters, when they have to charge on the go or in the wild. And pulling those pieces together has definitely been a challenge for some of the early adopters that Jennifer was talking about, getting the vehicles ready and getting the drivers ready for that experience. So we like to think of it in terms of, as you said, the planning phase. How do you work with your drivers, and how do you think about which states are more suitable than others to put electrification in? Is there on-the-go charging nearby so that they can charge up? After you do that, that gives you a good subset of viable targets. Then you move into that deployment phase. How do you put in the charging infrastructure that you do need at your offices, at your depots, and at your homes? And then go to the operational phase. What we're finding is that for these corporate fleets, the real key differentiators as they go into operational phase are, do they have good environmental sustainability goal reporting, number one, and number two, can they reimburse those drivers, those corporate fleet drivers, as they did in the gas or the diesel world, to make it simple for them to continue doing their job and not worry about it, just enjoy the electric vehicle driving experience and not worry about the fueling. So that's the three phases. Thanks, Vartan.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Simon. Those definitely, in my work right now at GreenBiz, but even before, working with many fleets, those have been actually the three buckets that come up. And I think that kind of overlays with the conventional fleet operation, but it's become so redundant for operating a regular diesel fleet that it doesn't, you don't think about that as much. But now with an EV fleet, you're going back to the basics and thinking about it again, but with the unique part of now we have a different type of vehicle. With that, we're going to move to the second bucket, or second kind of section of this conversation, which is around OEMs and the supply chain portion of a conversation when dealing with electrifying a fleet. So Maria, you also, when we were speaking earlier, you shared some interesting insights because many fleets are right now struggling to complete vehicle orders because OEMs are backlogged and cannot fulfill the orders. And this issue isn't just for EV, that's frankly extending to internal combustion engine vehicles as well. How is the supply chain issue impacting your work right now in electrifying Wheels Donlen's fleet? And then what are the solutions you're implementing right now to navigate around that?
The big thing right now, it's not just the chip shortage. It's a number of different factors. It's the whole supply chain, as you stated. Not only are the OEMs not able to complete the vehicles and deliver vehicles, they're also limiting fleet allocation. A lot of the OEMs are pushing vehicles towards retail. So for a consumer like you and I, but those that need them in a fleet commercial application, those numbers are being very limited, and that is an artificial constraint on our clients as they look to not only replace their existing internal combustion engine vehicles, but put EVs into their fleet as well too. And it's difficult to work around that, but the best advice that we've been able to give everyone is diversify who you're working with. If you were a Ford fleet or a GM fleet or a Stellantis fleet, start taking a look at a couple of other OEMs that might have vehicles that meet your requirements. Because if you put all of those eggs in one basket, and we've had something as crazy as a 6,000 unit fleet being told that they're not getting any of the 400 vehicles they need to get for this year, and there's nothing that they can do about it. Which then, of course, puts a big crimp in replacement cycling, and then it increases not only fuel spend because the vehicles are older and the gas mileage is reduced, but it also increases the maintenance spend because the vehicles are older and need more maintenance done to them. Another stop on the vehicle supply chain issue is the vehicles just don't exist from an EV perspective. You have fleets that work from a sedan and light SUV. So a lot of those fleets that have take-home fleets, pharmaceutical fleets like Biogen, where you have sales reps driving the vehicles and they go to and from offices, but they dwell at home and they have that ability to charge overnight for 8 to 10 hours. But then you also have fleets that are vocational fleets. Work truck fleets where you have Ford F-150s or Silverados and work vans in place, and a lot of them have upfits. And there are just not vehicles available. I mean, we've obviously seen the introduction of the Ford F-150 Lightning, and the Silverado EV is coming out next year. But there's nothing really out there now that meets the requirements that a pickup truck user needs. And then, there's one thing that I always say is that there is a good thing that's come out of the fact that you cannot get vehicles right now. It gives you the opportunity to focus on your infrastructure, because if you don't have your infrastructure plan in place and have started executing on it, you're not going to be ready once those vehicles start hitting the ground for you. And there's nothing worse than having an EV sit because you'd have no place to charge it. I mean, from a depot perspective, and I know Simon can elaborate this on a little bit better basis, but 12 to 18 months for a fairly medium-sized depot infrastructure solution is par for the course these days. It's taken a month to 6 weeks to get a home charger installed, depending upon permitting processes and things of that nature. So it's really a blessing in disguise that you can't get vehicles, because it's allowing you to focus on the infrastructure to make sure that you have that deployed before you have the vehicles, so that your drivers aren't frustrated and it becomes a much easier process, because this is new technology and you need to find champions in every part of the business. And once you've done that, then it makes the deployment of the rest of the vehicles a lot easier.
Yeah, just quickly follow on from what Maria was saying. Supply chain is interesting, and as you move forwards, don't be deterred from moving forwards. Just do the planning that Maria talked about, and make sure that on the infrastructure side, like the vehicle, you choose partners that are a little agnostic, that can go to a different switchgear or a different charger to meet your needs correctly. It's an evolving market, and the supply chain is evolving, but it's a great time to get started. Don't be put off by what you're hearing today. We're just trying to kind of give some advice on how to get started effectively and make it a success.
Certainly, and we will actually, Maria and Simon, you teed up the infrastructure conversation that we're going to have in a little bit perfectly. So we'll dive into that charging convo in a little bit. But your insights, Maria, you shared, and Simon, are very helpful, I think, for people listening in. Jennifer, do you have any additional insights from Biogen's perspective on navigating the supply chain issue?
Yeah, I guess I'll just add, so I can echo everything that they've just said. We've had ordering banks closed where we just can't make any orders for vehicles, or we've been told it's going to be at least 12 months before we could get anything. And so that's, I guess, the perspective I can share is, what does that mean internally for our targets and our ambition? So, you know, we've tried to calibrate expectations for 2022 with leadership, right? So even though 2027 is our target year to be all electric, we have interim targets each year of what we want to achieve, right, to keep on track. And we've pretty much come out and said, look, we're not going to make the 2022 number. It's just not going to happen. And you know, it's part of our corporate scorecard. It's, you know, it's got a lot of visibility at the company. And so we wanted to be transparent and set that expectation now that, you know, we're not at the point where we think we have to change the entire outlook, but for this year and maybe next year, right, things are not going to go as planned. And we're hopeful that at some point we can catch up and keep working at it. But to Simon's point, right, nobody's throwing in the towel. We're going to face the challenges head on and figure out what to do in the meantime. And you know, we are looking at more chargers in our office settings to, you know, make sure people can charge when they're at work in all the different countries where we have business. So that work is ongoing. We're continuing to evaluate employees, right? So when the time is ready and we're able to go, we know where we're going to deploy, so we can keep that planning going, even if we can't do the ordering. So still lots of work going on, and we're still very excited about the commitment. You know, take them as they come, the challenges. And we all know that everything in the climate and health space these days is a challenge, but it's got to be done. And so we'll just keep pivoting and figuring out the pathway that works best.
Yeah, not only does it need to be done, I mean, it's being, regulated to be done by certain countries and certain governments. So I think exactly. if you rely on the fact that, we're going to wait, I mean, I think the point is that you can take this time if there are delays from OEMs to plan out the EV journey that you're going to have for your corporate fleet, because you don't want to come to a moment where you don't have a plan, you don't have the infrastructure in place, but then you also can't purchase a conventional diesel or internal combustion engine vehicle because they're no longer being allowed to be sold. And then you're at a moment where your company may very well have a wall to climb very quickly, because you have to purchase new vehicles and they're only electric and you don't have a plan to get those vehicles in place.
Yeah.
I think the whole thing could be summed up with optimistic realism. We need to be very aware of the situation as it exists now, but we also have to be incredibly optimistic and pragmatic about where we're going to go in the future. You're right. These incentives, these mandates, both in Europe and the United States are coming, whether we want them to or not. So putting our heads in the sand and ignoring them is going to result in exactly what you said. We're going to hit that wall, and it's going to be very difficult to get over that wall.
So Maria, I'm going to stick with you because you're the person I was going to speak to next. And also you raised some good points right there. Ultimately, you also shared some insights when we spoke earlier about how companies shouldn't focus on the flashy option of going EV right now, if they obviously also can't because they have delays in getting those vehicles delivered. But there are other real tangible ways that they can reduce their corporate fleet emissions, which may not be as flashy, but will reduce emissions. So, I mean, what do you say about that? How should companies approach getting plug-in hybrids? Because I know sometimes when speaking to corporate fleets, they often think about, and that's a real thought to think about, which is locking in those emissions because your fleet turnover may not go every year, in which case you'll have those emissions going further into the decade, when you actually could have had an EV if you waited. So how do you balance that decision making internally?
Well, you know, as of right now, it's the decision is being made for a lot of fleets just because of the vehicle availability issues. But we are advising fleets to go back to the basics. It's really fleet management 101. You need to make sure that you're right sizing and right typing the fleet. So not just having the right number of vehicles, but having the right type of vehicles for each individual job need. So if, for example, you need a 3/4 ton, or if somebody has a 3/4 ton pickup truck, but it can be done with a compact pickup truck, there's no need for that 3/4 ton pickup truck to stay in the fleet. And maybe that could be swapped out for a smaller vehicle, which will automatically increase fuel efficiency. Another way is to reduce your vehicle miles traveled. If you can do more meetings via Zoom or Teams and conferences like this from a virtual perspective, you're obviously not putting as many miles on a vehicle. And that includes optimizing routing, especially for the delivery fleets. I mean, if you optimize the routing, you're doing not only a good job of reducing vehicle miles traveled, but you're going to increase your fleet fuel efficiency, which is point number 3 there. As you move forward, look at vehicles that have increased miles per gallon, city and highway estimates, and as well as reductions in idling. I mean, an idling reduction is a great way to reduce your emissions. Idling a car for 10 seconds uses more gas than if you would turn the vehicle off and start it again. It's obviously not necessarily something that can be done on a regular basis, but just having an understanding of that is helpful in explaining to drivers why you should really watch your idling times. And not only does it put a lot of engine hours on vehicles, which then leads to increased maintenance costs, but it's a very easy way to reduce your emissions if you can cut your idling time. And then, of course, finally, optimizing cost-effective use of alternative fuels like compressed natural gas and propane autogas and things like that. If those are alternatives that can be deployed in your fleet and they can make fiscal sense for you to do so, then take a look at it. I mean, there are a number of waste haulers, refuse trucks that run on compressed natural gas. There are buses that metro fleets can use that run on compressed natural gas or propane. There are alternatives out there that you can use to move forward. And then, of course, this is multimodality. This is not just, okay, let's talk about one person per one vehicle. Look at ride hailing. Instead of saying somebody needs a vehicle because they have to get to meetings in town, maybe Uber or Lyft is an opportunity in which to do so. Also, pooled or shared vehicle solutions. Instead of having one vehicle assigned to one driver, maybe have a pool of vehicles that are available to drivers for them to use as necessary. Not only will you cut down on the number of vehicles, but you'll increase the vehicle utilization. And then, of course, offering mobility budgets. New York City is a great example of this. There are electric scooters all over the place. Instead of hopping in a car or hopping in a taxi or an Uber, take an electric scooter if you feel like it. And then parking programs and incentivizing transit usage over individual vehicle usage as well too.
I would love to see a day where corporate fleets incentivize scooters over cars. People can just get around in electric scooters to their meetings. Yep. Might have to switch out a few scooters to get to the point, but
exactly.
Great way to reduce emissions. Jennifer, were you going to come in there? I saw you unmuted yourself.
Yeah. I don't think the scooter will work for someone who has to drive 100 miles to a healthcare clinic, but I get your point. So, for us, certainly emissions reductions are important, right? On the journey to 100% electrification. We have an approved science-based target, for scope 1 and 2 emissions. That's, 50% by 2030, like everybody else. So yeah, we're definitely interested in that. So we're moving away from the internal combustion engine, altogether in the US. In fact, I don't think we're even offering any 100% internal combustion engines anymore in our US fleet. So if you don't get an EV, you're getting a hybrid. And some of our larger markets in Europe, like Germany and France, they're looking to do the same thing. So, as far as our corporate target goes, those don't give us credit because it does need to be a 100% battery electric vehicle to check the box for the target, but certainly checks the box on being more efficient and using less fossil fuels to power our fleet and reduce emissions. So that is definitely part of our strategy. That's the plan B, basically, in markets where the EVs are not available.
Thank you for that additional insight, Jennifer. So now we're going to be going to the charging infrastructure point of conversation, which is frankly the most difficult and spicy point of electrifying a fleet, I think, at this point now, because the vehicles are coming, even though they're delayed, they're coming. How do we address charging? And we have Simon from Amply Power, who focuses entirely on fleet charging. So Simon, fleet managers have not had the ability or the chance to work with utilities, for example, to refuel a fleet, to charge a fleet, because they've had to work with diesel vehicles. But we've had the conversation around what fleet managers need to be aware of when electrifying a fleet now. But what's changed in 2022? What should someone who's electrifying a fleet now be aware of that they otherwise did not know was available last year or the year before? What's new now in electrifying a fleet?
Yeah, I think I think what's new now is that just like we're talking about, there are a round of early innovators that have gone through, that have gone from the pilot phase into production, and so we have a lot of good learnings. We're also seeing improvements from the utility companies in their programs and their awareness, so that now, as a corporate fleet, when you first start talking to your electricity company or utility, you won't be just stuck with your account manager. They'll be able to reference you to an EV fleet team in many regions, and that helps because then they have an understanding of this new load that's coming, and that it's not business as usual. So having a set of partners around you can help, but also having that experience from the utilities is really a big starting point. There are supply chain issues with utilities too, so starting that work early is key to success. And then the complexity for our corporate fleet customers is really that they're dealing with people's homes and offices all over the country, and the US is very fragmented with utilities. We have over 3,000 utilities in the US, and so just thinking about that step, how are you going to deal with all of those different ones? Do you need to, can you aggregate that work up and really simplify it for yourself so you can keep on track? So putting that planning phase really is what's in place now, and I think you're hearing from Maria and from myself and from others that there is some experience in there. We've gone through this with the first set, and we have some clear steps on planning for that deployment. It's always going to be staged. There's not one fleet that will go 100% in one go. And so, the other part is working it into your workflow so that you've got a mixed fleet as you're making this transition. How do you make it simple? What's important to you? Have a think about what are your reports, and what are your costs, and what do you need to match and think about as you go to a partial electric fleet on the way to zero emission vehicles.
No, thank you for that. I mean, this also is for you, Simon, but Jennifer, Maria, jump in because you have the fleet voice there. When I speak to a lot of companies with their electrifying their fleets, they often tell me that they are routing vehicles to only charge at home or charge in the depot, and they are avoiding the public infrastructure for many reasons, one of which is reliability. The station may not be working. Another may simply just be that they cannot ensure that the driver will get to the station and the station will be available to charge, and that may then add on additional waiting time that they have to experience. And at the end of the day, the customer experience or fulfilling an order or whatever the company is doing is the top priority, and they cannot jeopardize that over going towards an EV. So any insights around that? I mean, do you think that will be the way of the future? Do you think companies will just rely on depot and home charging or integrate public infrastructure?
No, I think it's and I'm happy to hear the other views as well. But I think it is all three. It's at home charging for those that are fortunate enough to have at home charging. As you look at Uber and Lyft drivers, they're often unfortunately not able to have a personal garage, and so in those areas you need to look at other solutions like on the go charging, and then for corporate fleets, putting in some workplace charging is a key part of the overall solution. But one of the interesting side effects of electric vehicles is just that move to digital. The electric vehicle is far more of a connected vehicle, and electricity as an infrastructure is far more digitally connected than the gas and the diesel world. And what that's leading to is the ability to really monitor and help the driver out in a lot more fine-grained manner. The telematics integration of where the vehicle's going, where the routing is going, ensuring that there are more than one charging opportunities, that no one's going to get stranded. There's really, it's begun, it's there, and I think it's going to continue for the next few years as we see this market evolve in the electric space. Maria?
Yeah, I could comment on that. So, I think it depends on your kind of fleet, right? So our drivers drive long distances away from their homes and away from the office, right? So they do have to rely on public charging or on the go charging. or at their destination, right? Whether it's, like I said, a hospital or a doctor's office or, an office park. And so, training drivers on how to plan their day is so essential for them to be successful. Driving this car is different than driving a regular car, right? Where, those of us who don't have an EV, we don't think about gassing up our cars until we look around and say, oh, I'm going to fill up my car, right? You can't plan your day that way with an electric vehicle today, because the charging is not that available. And so I think for them to be successful and not come back saying, this isn't working for me, you've got to give them very good training on how to plan their days, how to use those electronics, and how to use the connectedness of their vehicle to help them, make a seamless day happen for them. So we're installing home chargers for employees who have a home situation that allows that. We also have charging at all of our offices where people can come and charge. But like I said, our field folks, they don't even have a home office, right? They're in states all around the U.S. and all through the countrysides, and then they don't have a home office. So charging at home is important, but also charging on the go and their final destination is important. So they do need to use these maps, plan out their day, know where they're going to stop ahead of time, and they can't fly by the seat of their pants, so to speak. That's where we get into trouble. And unfortunately, we've had a couple people turn their EVs in because their territory's changed since. This is a watch out, right? When we first did their assessment and we said, okay, you're in a good area, it looks like this will work for you. Then a year goes by and they have a different territory, and now they're like, I can't get from here to there without charging, and then I can't find charging. And the other interesting thing is that they're claiming their cars are not getting the mileage that the manufacturers say they should be getting out of a full charge. So we're doing a little bit of investigating on that too, because some of them are saying they're only getting 150 miles to a full charge, which is well short of what these cars claim. So I don't know if that's another training issue or what's going on. So I think, thinking that people are just going to get behind the wheel and make it happen is going to set you up for a little bit of trouble. They're going to need a lot of help to figure out how to work this new vehicle and this new framework, for sure.
I think, and I couldn't agree with both of you any more than what you've said already. I think that there is one example of a public charging network, well, semi-public charging network, that has shown that is feasible to do this, and that's Tesla. I mean, Tesla has done what it needed to do with its supercharging network. You can drive cross country in a Tesla, and your Tesla will tell you where you need to charge and how long you need to charge for. And those chargers are up. I mean, the last time I looked, the public charging network was anywhere from 18 to 20% downtime at any given point. Whether it's the charger port not working or whether it's just not connected, there's this much more significant amount of downtime than one would expect. Tesla superchargers are at 2 to 3%. I mean, this is something that is significantly better than anything else. So if you can deploy Teslas, you can rely more on the public charging. But the problem is that not everybody's deploying Teslas. Teslas don't necessarily fit for it. So I think the public charging is going to be a part of it, but those phase one deployments are really going to have to rely on the home charging and the depot charging at an office location or a yard of sorts where you're going to go charge the larger medium and heavy duty trucks. It's much more of a situation where we're looking at the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, which was passed in November of last year. $7.5 billion was allocated towards infrastructure investments. And the goal is to have a charger every 50 miles on the interstate highway system, which is great for those that are using the interstate highway system. But what happens when you're talking about state routes and local roads and more rural areas where there are still hospitals and there are still doctors' offices and there are still things and clients that need to be visited. And now you're putting yourselves in a situation where you can't necessarily do that. So that deployment along the interstate highway system is great, but we still have a ways to go to make it as ubiquitous as gasoline refueling.
It'll be very interesting to see. I know Tesla's opening up the supercharger in Europe, and they're actually going to be opening up apparently at the end of this year, by the end of this year in the US starting. So just see if that reliability and uptime sticks with non-Tesla vehicles. So we have 5 minutes left, and there are a lot of questions in the Q&A. So if possible, I'm going to throw some of these at you all, and let's keep them, let's like a rapid fire these so we can get through as many questions as possible. The first one is from Bill Farrell to Jennifer. What vehicles are you ordering, and what are the tools you're using when doing your analysis to get the right vehicle that you're ordering? It's exactly what you were just speaking about, Jennifer. So
Sure. So we are deploying Teslas right now because of that availability of the charging network. It's really the only thing that we can rely on, and that's not just in the U.S. but also in Europe. So in Europe we have some other models, some Audis and Volkswagens and other things too, but it's still predominantly Tesla. And the tool we're using is, we use a survey tool that the employees fill out that tells us, do you have a single family home? Do you have dedicated parking space? Do you have the right electricity availability in your home or dwelling? If you're leasing, is your landlord going to approve this? All those kinds of things. And then we also ask questions about their territory, how far they need to drive, those kinds of things. So it's just a standard, survey tool, and we have everybody fill that out, and they get sort of ranked as to what their readiness is for an EV.
Biogen is definitely doing a best practice when it comes to those driver assessments. It is that's what we also recommend to all of our clients as well too. You really need to be able to understand the use case for the individual drivers, those phase one deployments. You really want to go after the low-hanging fruit to know what exactly is going to get you the best result in the shortest time possible.
Great. This question is from Megan. On the difficult markets where it's hard to electrify a fleet, what can you do or are you doing to accelerate EVs in those more difficult markets? Or do you largely just need to wait for infrastructure to come in before deploying the fleet?
Well, I'm happy to answer for Biogen. So in those territories, we do have some employees that do not have large territories. So their potential, if in the urban area where they're located, there is more charging. So we've got maybe like one or two, and we've told these offices, you don't have to have a plan for everybody. Even if you convert one car, it's awesome, right? You want to participate now, let's do it. So we've done that. And then the alternative is hybrids, right? So if they can't do a plug-in hybrid, then just, Priuses and other types of hybrids. What's the best thing we can accomplish, basically? We want everybody who wants to participate in the program to do so as soon as they can. And so we've got some folks in Latin America who are really excited about this, and they really want to do it. And we're like, we can't make the EV happen yet, but here's what we can do. So we'll work with them, locally to see what we can support. We don't want to just say, no, you guys won't be for 2 more years, right? We want to convert as many as we can to whatever we can. That's been our philosophy.
Great. Just so I can get one more question in the final 2 minutes. This one potentially is for you, Simon, but others as well. What do you see is needed for site resiliency to support charging infrastructure, on-site storage, generators, or both?
Sure. It really depends on the scale. If you look at our transit bus space, we're often deploying solar canopies over the depot and some battery storage for peak shaving. But when you think about how big and how dense these batteries on the vehicles are, that's really only limited. But the solar or even low NOx generation as a resiliency can be a great strategy. As you get above 20% of your fleet being electric, that's when you need to start thinking about that resiliency. But get started, get up to 20%, and then look at what you need to have that resilient power. California's particularly problematic with the wildfires and the ability for the utility to shut off power. We're doing a lot of work with the CEC, the California Energy Commission, and others to help to solve that resiliency.
Amazing. Well, I'm assuming 30 seconds away from time. So it's been a pleasure speaking with you all. Thank you so much, Jennifer, Simon, Maria. It's always great to chat. I hope the audience got what I hoped and promised in the very beginning, which is something new out of electrifying a fleet. So some value gain, some knowledge added to whatever you're doing in terms of EVs and electrifying your corporate fleet or working in the space. So thank you all. I hope you do complete the survey and enjoy the rest of Virtual Electrify.
Thanks,
Thank you all.
Vartan.
Thanks so much, everyone. Bye-bye.